Hello and welcome to this eAF webinar on the new variation classification in the eAF. Just to clarify the scope of this webinar, it is our aim today is to answer questions related to the technical implementation of the new variation classification in the electronic application forms. So please, if you have regulatory questions on a specific submission type, either to the EMA or to the national competent authorities, this Q&A is not for the regulatory implementation of the new classification guideline and the new variation regulation, but it is for the aspects of the implementation in the form. How do I find the new scopes in the form? If there is a discrepancy between the classification guideline and the eAF, how to act, what form to submit, and when. These are the aspects for the scope of today's Q&A, just to clarify that. But we can move to the agenda. So indeed, we'll have a short introduction. So I will go through some main principles and details on how to access these updated forms. Then we will have plenty of time for questions and answers, and then we'll look at the next steps and closing. So as usual, please do send your questions via the Slido. Note that the session is recorded and we will be making the recording available. We will also take the most important questions from the Slido, and as usual, we will publish the outcome of these questions also on the event page. The interaction via Slido is, of course, voluntary, as always. And please note that you can either send your own questions, or you can upvote questions that you would like to have answered. So if someone has already sent a similar question that you were thinking, you can simply upvote that question. And we will be showing, of course, those questions on the screen. And if needed, I can also do a live demonstration on where to find the forms if that is necessary. And we can then go to the next page. So just a quick a reminder where this is all coming from. So as you are all aware, the revised variation regulation entered into force on 1st of January last year in 2025. And at that point, some changes were already implemented. For example, the mandatory work sharings. And that has been applying already for over a year. However, then in September, the Commission has published an updated variation classification guideline, which is the document that details the scopes for the variation applications, and a single cut-off date for the entry into the force for those new classification guideline scopes has been decided, and that is the 15th of January this year in 2026. We have also highlighted here the links to the guidance to the EMA page and also on the CMDH website. So you can always refer to those guidances through these published documentations. Then go to the next page. So this is something that we really wanted to emphasize and highlight to everybody when to submit. So please note that any new variation application using the new version, which would be in the PLM portal web-based application form, the January 2026 version, or if you are still using the interactive PDF eAF from the eSubmissions website, it is the version 1.28.00 of the variation application form. They should not be submitted to the EMA prior to the 15th of January. And I'm really talking about the midnight on the 15th. So if you are wanting to submit already on the 14th at 10 o'clock in the evening, please hold back. Do not do that. Wait until the 15th, because all the applications that are received before the 15th of January this year, using the new version of the application form, i.e. following the new variation classification guideline, would be rejected by the EMA, and you would then have to resubmit your application either on or after the 15th of January. So please do not submit prior to the 15th of January. This, of course, only applies to those application forms that are using the new classification guideline. So if you are still wanting to submit an application following the let's call it's still the current for some days, the current variation classification guideline, which uses the September 2021 version in the PLM portal, or if you're using the interactive PDF, the version number is 1.27.0.1. Those applications must be received by the EMA before the 15th. So this would be before the 14th of January 2026. Before 23:59, so just before the midnight, before the 15th. So it's very, very important to remember these timelines to avoid any rejections. Because again, if we receive that application form on the 15th and it is a new application, we will unfortunately have to reject that, and you will have to refill the new application form and then resubmit. So this would lead into additional work, not only to the applicants, but also to the regulators, as we will need to reject these applications. So, of course, as always, ongoing variations should continue using the previous versions of the form. And as always, the form version must not be changed for ongoing variations unless specifically requested by the regulator. So, of course, if you have already submitted an application, let's say today or this Friday, and then you are requested to submit a validation response even after the 15th. If you are requested to submit an update to the application form that has already started, has been submitted prior to the 15th and needs to be updated after the 15th, you should not change the version of the form. So you should then be using the previous variation classification guideline. So I hope that clarifies the any doubts that there may be in relation to the submission timelines for these and the usage of the new form. And we can move to the next slide. So where can I find these new versions? So we have already published some time ago the version for the new variation classification in the PLM portal. So in the PLM portal, when you enter the system, you log in and you start creating a new application form. There isn't, in a way, two different versions of the form available, but you simply select create new application form, and once you have opened that window where you are where you're creating the form, you will be presented two options for the form version, and in there we still have available the September 2021 version, and it will remain available for some time for the reason that you may need to update an application form that you have already submitted. And from there, the second entry on the list, you will see a form for January 2026. And this January 2026 is the version that contains the new variation classification scopes. So for anything that is to be submitted after the 15th, you should always select that January 2026 version. Eventually, we will be removing the September 2021 version, but we have not yet decided a date because there may be need to update an ongoing variation application, and we, of course, do not want to prevent you from doing that. And when you are inside the application form, just to make sure that you are using the new version, you can see, of course, the new classification guideline scopes are slightly different than they were previously. And for example, for administrative changes, the category now starts with E as opposed to with A. So those are some of the easy checks that you can make before you start filling in the form. And then, of course, prior to submitting the form, please always make sure that you check that you have used the correct version of the form. We can go to the next slide, please. So here again, prior to submission, when you have exported the PDF in the PLM portal, you can see that on the cover page of the form, you will have this January 2026 label, which has been here highlighted with the green box. So that's just another way to confirm. And of course, as a reminder to everybody, with the interactive PDF eAF, the eAF version number is very, very important information for the regulators. However, with the PLM portal eAF, the eAF version number here in this screenshot, you can see the 2.4.6.3. It's really not so relevant at all. It is just a technical version. So you can ignore that and please concentrate on the January 2026 or September 2021 version that is mentioned on the cover page of the PDF. And we can move to the next slide. So if you are using the interactive PDF eAF, we have also updated this form and made it available, as there are still some scenarios where the web-based form cannot be used due to some technical limitations, for example. So as usual, the interactive PDF forms are available through the eSubmissions eAF website, and it is clearly marked as the January 2026 version, and the version number is 1.28. So you can see the difference from there. We haven't published release notes because this is really the only change. There isn't a change in the content of the application form per se. It is just the list of classification codes that are available from the section 3, from the drop-down menu where you're selecting the scopes, where the difference is. So otherwise the content is exactly the same. We can move to the next slide, where we can see again this difference in the cover page of the interactive PDF application form. In the top left-hand corner, you can see the form variation version number 1.28, and you can also see the date January 2026. And of course, in the drop-down menu, you will need to see the new classification codes, and then you can be certain that you're using the correct version. So that was just a few important reminders, and we can now move to the actual Q&A session. So Francesco, please, do we have any questions?
Yes, we have some questions. As mentioned before, we will follow the order of the most updated ones. So let's jump into the first one. Why you replaced letter A in classification for administrative variation by E? What does it mean, E, and was it necessary?
So I would consider this is a bit of a maybe a regulatory nature question. So of course, the new classification scopes were defined by the Commission, European Commission, and it was decided to change the numbering or the codes. Of course, A for administrative changes was of course very intuitive. However, as the A was already used in the previous variation classification guideline, I think there was a decision to have something distinctively different. So I believe this would be the reason why it was chosen. But this is something that we would have to ask the Commission.
Thank you. So our question, we can move on with the following one, which is one we already seen. When the new eAF in PLM portal will become mandatory?
It's a very good question. However, today we are not in a position to be able to answer that question. There are some technical dependencies that we must solve before we can launch the PLM portal use as a mandatory tool. So until those issues have been solved, so namely, there are some issues relating to the use of organizational data in the PLM portal that we are not able to solve through the eAF itself. And these issues need to be solved on a actual platform level. So these are issues that impact multiple different applications. So if we now made the PLM portal web-based application form mandatory, it could be that there's a situation that you have no access to form, or you cannot find the correct organization in the form. There are also occasionally issues with the products because we're still using data flows from XEVMPD and from some of our internal systems for CAPS. So until all these dependencies have been solved, we are not able to launch mandatory use. However, we are now in strongly recommended use, and how that should be interpreted is that you should use the PLM portal web-based application form unless you are technically prevented to do so. So this is, let's say, the closest step to being mandatory as we can be, but we do not have yet a date for the mandatory use.
Christina, the answer was really clear. Let's move on to the following question. Where to find categories that?
Yes, so indeed, the new classification guideline does not explicitly detail on which scope and which level should have the category set. We have discussed this extensively with our regulatory affairs colleagues, and category Z scopes have been added into the RMS catalog from where we retrieve the data, the classifications in the eAF. So in both in PLM Portal eAF and in the interactive PDF eAF, you should find the category Z scopes indicated with other variation as per usual. So there is no difference on how the category set application classification codes are available in the new guideline as opposed to how they were implemented in the previous version. So you will find them when you start selecting the scope, you will find them where applicable. If there is a category set that you would need to use, but you cannot find it, please raise a ticket through the EMA Service Desk portal, and we will be liaising with the relevant regulatory colleagues to see if this set scope should be available. Please also include a justification why it is needed. This will speed up the adding of new scopes. And as usual, it's normally very quick to make amendments. So also if you find any discrepancies, or if a scope you think is not correct, it has a typo, it's missing, it's duplicated, please raise a service desk ticket, and normally we will be able to address these very quickly.
Thank you very much, Christina. Okay, the following one. Was the performance improved so the use of the eAF is possible without any restrictions?
So did we have been implementing various different improvements? There are further improvements coming. So we have actually again discussed the performance improvements for the PLM portal web-based application form during our previous planning session in December, and some performance improvements have been scheduled to be implemented in this first quarter of the year. This is especially relevant for large work sharing applications where we know that there are currently some technical limitations. We are also similarly looking at performance improvements for the interactive PDF eAFs. However, of course, we do not want to spend too much time on improving technology that will be discontinued in hopefully near future. I know I'm saying this just after I've said that we don't know yet when the use will become mandatory, but we are working on further performance improvements. There have been some, but not all issues are fully solved at this point.
Thank you. The following question. If I've saved a draft with older version of eAF in PLM Portal, is it possible to clone and convert to that to newer version of form to save time?
Very, very good and important question. Unfortunately, no. As the selection of the version happens when you are creating a new form, it is not possible to clone from the old version into the new one. I know this can be unfortunate, especially if you have created, let's call it a template form that you always use and simply just clone. Unfortunately, this is not possible. It was technically more complicated to implement, and there could have potentially been errors. So we decided to, let's call it, play it safe and just simply create two separate versions of the form. So unfortunately, the cloning and converting to the newer version is not possible. This is also, in a way, applicable the same approach as we have in the interactive PDF. Normally, you cannot export and import the XML into a form that changes the version number, because there may be quite some changes and then it doesn't work properly. So please note that when you are creating a form for the first time for using the new classification guideline, you will need to create it from the scratch. You cannot clone.
Thank you. Extremely clear. The following question states from Johannes. What if it is not possible to submit all AI variation implemented in 2025 till 15 January 2026, for example, due to lack of documentation or technical issues?
So for this type of questions, please review the guidance published on the EMA website and on the CMDH website. So some specific scenarios are detailed in there. If you have a specific question, please contact the relevant regulator as advised in those guidances to check specifically if you should use the new version, or and just simply convert the code, whatever was the classification code of the change that was implemented previously. So this is a very regulatory matter, and for these kind of issues, our business colleagues requested to be contacted by the applicant prior submission, because there is no single blanket answer to this. So please always check prior to submitting.
Thank you. The next question. How can type IA variation procedures that are submitted prior to 15 January 2026 but are rejected after 15 January 2026 be resubmitted? Which version of the EAF can be used in this case?
So if you are intending to submit prior to the 15th of January, and let's say it is rejected because of you have selected the wrong scope, for example, or you have again, there isn't a single answer, so it really depends on the reason of the rejection, whether it's a actually rejection or whether it is a request to resubmit using a different scope. So here again, it is almost impossible to give one blanket answer. It really depends on the scenario. And in those cases, the regulator rejecting the application should give you the instructions whether you should use the new classification guideline or if you should follow the previous classification guideline. Normally, if it is a submission that has been received prior to the 15th, you should follow the old classification guideline. But again, I cannot give a blanket answer because there are too many possibilities. So I understand it may be frustrating, but in those cases, the regulator should give you clear details on which form to use.
That's clear. Thank you. The next question states, I have downloaded the interactive PDF version v28.0.0 and am experiencing error messages when opening the form. Web service types of change currently unavailable.
Okay.
And I am unable to fill in certain fields. For example, member states, active substance.
Yes, so this is in fact one of the, I would say, the most common service desk query that we receive for the interactive PDFs. So when you receive this in, let's say, 99% of the cases, it means that the form has not been trusted. With the interactive PDF form, when there is a new version of the form, you will always need to, let's say, retrust it. So it could be that you've been using the version 1.27 for a long time. It doesn't ask you to trust it again. This is a new version that you haven't opened before. Now, it depends on the version of Adobe Acrobat that you are using or you have installed in your laptop, how this request to trust the form is displayed. In some versions of Adobe, you will get an exclamation mark at the top right-hand panel of the form, and you will need to click into that tiny little exclamation mark, and then you get this yellow banner across the screen saying where you can say you get two trust options, trust one time or trust always. If you click trust always, then you don't need to repeat this step. If you say trust one time, you will then always need to do that when you open it again. Some versions don't give you that little exclamation mark, but another way to do it is to scroll to the very, very end of the form, and there is a button at the bottom right-hand corner that says Update Lists. If you click that little Update Lists button, you will get this yellow banner across the top of the screen, and then again the trust options open from there. There are other ways also to trust the form. You can go to the properties and you can trust it from there, or you can add it into the trusted location. So there are, I think, 4 different ways to trust the form. But if you get this, please see if you get the exclamation mark. That is perhaps the easiest. Then if you don't get that, scroll to the bottom and click the update lists, and this should hopefully help.
Thank you very much, Christina. That was really precise answer. The following one. Are there any recommendation on the e-signature of the eAF?
Again, very good question. So if we're talking about the PLM portal web-based application form, of course, you don't add a signature into the form in the PLM portal itself. You have exported the PDF form from the portal, and then it includes, when you finalize an export, it includes what we called an integrity stamp, which is in a way a digital signature that is added into the form by the system to give the regulator the assurance that this form has been generated from the PLM portal. You can then add a qualified digital signature on top of that integrity stamp. Unfortunately, technically it is not possible to add an Adobe signature on top of that integrity stamp. For example, if your submission is for the EMA for centralized procedure, you do not need to add a digital signature. EMA does not require a further signature at this point of time in addition to the integrity stamp. If you are sending this application form to a member state that has specifically indicated that they require a digital signature, so for example, Poland requires a digital signature and they accept a digital signature. So you can simply add a qualified digital signature using your chosen technology on top of that integrity stamp. However, we are aware that some applicants do not have available for them a qualified digital signature. In those cases, we would recommend that you simply save an additional version of the form, which you have maybe saved prior to finalizing the form, and you simply add your other type of signature into the form. It could be an image of a signature, or it could be an Adobe signature, and then add it into your ECTD package with a different name. Call it annex to the application form with the signature or a signed eAF version. But that additional signed version should not contain the XML so that any importing systems don't get confused. But please check if your destination regulator requires a signature, and check if you have a qualified signature that you can add into the form. If it is the interactive PDF eAF, then you cannot use qualified digital signatures. That form must be locked using an image of a signature or a signature snippet, and you can find details on how to do that from the guidance documentation.
Thank you. Moving on to the following question. Is there a plan to make the PNP table more user-friendly? The toolbar is not visible when the text in the box is too long. Could the toolbar be locked and be accessible all the time?
Thank you for reporting that issue. We have indeed tried to make improvements into the present and proposed. I'm not sure if you're now referring to the interactive or the PLM portal version. In the PLM portal, we have now also kind of separated, so you can use a view of just the present or just the proposed, or both present and proposed at the same time. But we will have a look at with the issue, and please, if you can, do add comments into Slido if this issue with the present and proposed is in the interactive PDF or the web-based eAF, so that we can see if there is this issue with the toolbar, because of course that sounds like a technical issue that needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Christina. Looking forward to hear.
And maybe just to add, in a way,
Please.
we are of course we are hoping to solve this in a way, in two different ways. So we are also working on what we call structured changes. So a lot of the information in the present and proposed table or section are actually structured information. So we are working on a solution that will allow you technically amend the changes directly in PMS. So this is something that will hopefully be launched in production at some point this year. We will start slowly. We will first implement it for the manufacturer's business operations, then there will be something else and so forth. So it will not all come as a big bang, but it's a gradual change from the free text present and proposed table into more structured changes. Then, of course, when there are very, very complex tables or information that is not possible to be added, you can still use an annex to the application form. And we're also trying to improve the editing of the form itself. So we're trying to solve this in multiple different ways. But if there is a technical issue, please raise a ticket, add details, screenshots, and we can then also investigate these scenarios.
Thank you. Okay, the next question. Is EMA aware about the number of applications submitted until now via MRP DCP national procedure with eAF created in PLM portal, or is it EMA considering to track this number and the relevant technical validation issue which might occur?
It's a good question. So we can see easily from the back end how many forms have been created for MRP DCP national. So in December, we had already reached nearly, or maybe it was even over 8,000 forms that had been created. So the number of forms that had been created for non-cap procedures had already, let's say, overtaken the number of forms that had been created for centralized procedure. However, the number of application forms that has been submitted, unfortunately, at this point of time, it is not possible for EMA to know how many forms have been submitted, because the number of forms that have been created in a portal does not equal to the number that have been submitted to the member states, as the submission to the member states is done using CESP, and we don't receive copies of these forms. We at the EMA do not have access to this data. Also, some member states may track the number of PLM portal forms versus interactive PDFs received. Some member states may not do that. So at this point, it is not possible to see, but we can see a very clear trend on the usage being increasing steadily. And of course, we encourage the applicants to move to the PLM portal form use, and we also encourage NCAs to encourage their applicants to use the PLM portal where possible.
Great. That's great. Moving on to the following question. Due to recent delays on the CESP portal, what will happen if a submission sent on time is received after the 15th of January?
So if there is a technical issue, I would say you would have to check with the specific regulator. Of course, EMA does not use CESP, and for example, wasn't personally aware that there had been issues with CESP portal, because this is a tool used for non-cap submissions. I would say if you are experiencing an issue, please contact your regulator. Also, of course, it is very important to make sure that you submit on time. So if you must submit using the previous version of the form, using the current classification guideline, of course, please don't leave it to the quarter to midnight on the 14th, because indeed, if there are any technical issues, the regulator would most likely not receive it on time. So please give yourself sufficient time, because there can always be technical issues. Maybe it is not an issue with the portal, but perhaps your ECTD is not a valid ECTD. So there can be issues. So please allow sufficient time. I understand it can be a bit rushed, but and the technical issues can happen, but I'm sure you can solve those with the relevant regulator.
Thank you. The next question states, we were informed that the PTHA will implement the new classification guideline in their system starting with 9th of January already, meaning that we will not be able to submit between 9th and 15th of January for procedures where PET is MS.
Okay, so thank you for that. So what I understand that Portugal has already decided to make this amendment earlier on the 9th of January. So I've not heard of any any other member states of deciding to do that, but indeed it's a good idea to check your regulators website for any specific information. So this must be, I presume, due to a technical a dependency or an issue that they have chosen an earlier date. But this is, for example, for EMA, we are open for the current classification until the midnight of the 14th.
Well noted. Moving on to the following question. Does the classification of the variation need to be changed with the responses to questions received for variations submitted in 2025 under the old classification?
No, so if you have submitted under the old classification and you receive a validation request, a VSI asking you to update something on the form, you normally should not change the version of the form. So whatever has been submitted and started with the old classification should run according to the old classification. Whatever has started on or after the 15th with the new classification will follow the new classification. So if you have a type 1A that has had some has been implemented using the old classification, you may be requested to convert that to the new one, but it really depends on the submission date, and there should never be a change for the form or classification in the middle of the procedure. I hope that's clear.
Thank you very much. The next question. In the signature box, could I put the name and contact of my manager even if I will finalize the eAF?
Absolutely, indeed. So this is no different from any other process. So you could have a person who is responsible for the application, and that's their name that needs to be included in the signature. It doesn't matter who actually physically has filled in the application form, be it in the PDF format or in the PLM portal, but there's a person who is responsible for the signature, who is responsible for the application, and it's their details that should be included in the signature box, indeed, and not your name.
Thank you. The following question. For some categories of variation in the new version of eAF, the list of conditions does not appear, only the list of documentation. Is it something which will be corrected or is it normal? It is the case for Q2B5F.
No, it's definitely not normal. And indeed, it will be corrected now that we're aware of it. So, of course, there are a huge number of classification scopes. As you can imagine, we do not have an ability to go through every single scope for each document and each condition to check that everything is correct. So we are trusting that issues are being reported, and as and when they are being reported, we will definitely rectify them as soon as we detect them. Of course, sometimes we detect them ourselves and we will then immediately make the corrections. But if you come across any issue that there are anything missing, there's a typo, there's anything incorrect, please report them as soon as possible, and we will then update RMS and the changes will be reflected. Also, what is something important to note, because these are web-based lists from the reference management system from SPOR RMS. If you have already started filling in the form and then you realize one of the conditions does not appear, simply when we update the RMS and when the next time you go into that same form, the condition should become available. You don't need to do anything special to make it to become visible. As soon as we have corrected RMS, these entries will become visible. But it of course requires us to be aware that there's an issue. So please, if you detect any issues, raise a ticket and we will then work on correcting those issues.
Thank you, Christina. The next question states, While creating the eAF for apps in the PLM portal, we are facing the challenges in selecting the CMSs involved in the procedure. Not all MAHs associated with the products are available in the portal. Please advise.
So in any case where there may be a product missing or where there may be incorrect product information, so either the product name is not correct, the member state is missing, the product number is incorrect, anything incorrect in the product in the PLM portal eAF, please raise a ticket and indicate when you are selecting the category PMS, the product management service, and these issues will be corrected. eAF is simply PMS product data in the portal. So of course, if it's an urgent variation, you must fill it in. You always have now the backup of the interactive PDF eAF, or if you can wait, you raise a ticket, and we will normally respond to these types of tickets very, very quickly, and the product information will be corrected. Sometimes it could be if you have checked XEVMPD and the product is there indicated correctly. Please also check, for example, the legal basis or that the information is correct. Because sometimes a tiniest little error in XEVMPD would have then resulted that the product has been created differently or incorrectly in PMS. So it's super, super important to report these issues. And this is in fact one of the reasons why we have not moved into the mandatory use of the PLM portal eAF, because there are some product issues that may prevent the applicants to use the portal before those issues are corrected. But it is very important to report them to us timely.
Thank you. The next question. When will a tick box for annual updates be added to section 1 of the eAF?
So we have scheduled this annual updates tick box to be added into the eAF in Q2, which means between March and June this year. It was decided that it is not really necessary to have that because an annual update is a grouping of variations. So there isn't a specific need for the regulator to know that it's an annual update. This was extensively discussed at the EMA prior to the changes, or during when we were implementing the changes for the variation regulation before the 1st of January 2025, and we were told this is not necessary. Since then, we have agreed that we will implement this, but as the next, let's call it a patch of annual updates will most likely only start after the summer, because of course you would have implemented now all the annual updates for this year. So then the next sequence will only start after the summer. So we will implement that prior to the summer.
Thank you very much, Christina. Okay, archiving that one and moving on to the following one. Do you know what the MHR's position is with regards to the new eAF?
Unfortunately, no. So I'm not sure if they have implemented their own form or whether they are actually following the new classification, because of course this is a European Commission variation classification guideline, as MHRA being in the UK is no longer part of the EU. I'm not sure if they have decided to follow the new classifications or whether they are simply using the previous.
Thank you. The next question asks for a confirmation. Can you confirm whether we have submit a new variation after 15 January 2026 via PLM portal only, or eAF of new version is acceptable?
So as with the current classification guideline, you have two options. You can submit using the PLM portal web-based eAF, or you can choose to use the new version, the version 1.28 of the interactive PDF eAF. So both versions are available, and for EMA, both are acceptable. I'm not aware of any member state indicating that they would only accept a PLM portal eAF, or they would only accept the interactive PDF for the new variation classification. Both versions are available and can be used. And again, just to remind, in case we have any colleagues who have joined after the start of the webinar. So please, if you are submitting using the old variation classification guideline, the variation must arrive before the midnight of the 14th of January. If you are using the new classification guideline, you must not submit prior to the 15th of January. So if you submit just before in the evening of the 14th, that application would be rejected and you will be requested to resubmit.
Thank you for the clarification. The following question. Is there a new category that is the equivalent of classification C.I.Z from the old guideline? I cannot see this.
Good question. I know that we have added some C scopes, but I can't remember from the top of my head. Please raise a question through the service desk portal, or as a regulatory question to your specific regulator. And I know the regulatory colleagues have done some mapping between the current classification guideline and the new classification guideline to match which scope matches the old one. So those specific regulatory questions should be addressed through the relevant channels.
Thank you. The following question. What is the rationale behind adding Z for every guideline, considering these categories may not occur frequently? Are there any upcoming changes or adjustment planned for this classification structure?
So it's a good question. And in fact, because of course the classification guideline does not detail for which scope the set scopes should be available. We received a request from our regulatory colleagues that we should add them for everything. Of course, these categories may not occur frequently. When you think the let's say the sheer extent of how many scopes there are, it was partially also due to a technical approach. It is easier to do a kind of what we called a block import of the scopes into the system rather than adding them one by one for those ones where they are requested upon a request. So again, it was a choice how we should do it, and the regulatory colleagues indicated that we should add the set scopes by default. So there isn't any other reason that we are aware from the eAF side. So this was a regulatory decision, and then how it was done was driven by a technical limitation. So these are the reasons that we are aware of at this point. So if you have a regulatory question, please submit that either to the EMA or the CMDH, and that can be addressed.
Thank you very much, Christina. Before moving on to the last one or two questions, let me activate the feedback part of the Slido, which you can access easily through the slide in the same way. Please take a couple of minutes to insert your feedback and your inputs that will allow us to shape the future activities that eAF will put in place. And these inputs are really helpful, so please take a couple of minutes to provide us with your impressions. Moving on to the questions, we can address maybe one or two. Let's see if the times allows. The next one. PNP section of the new eAF has been improved. However, rendition of the downloaded eAF does not reflect what has been typed online, especially in terms of formatting. Example given space between paragraphs. Is it foreseen any further improvement?
Absolutely. So yes, that should have, of course, been reflected. I know we did indeed improvement of the proof of payment because you weren't able to correctly indicate all organizations for the payment. We'll definitely check that, and hopefully we're able to fix any issues. Of course, anytime you see anything like that, especially if it's directly after an update or a fix, please report it through the service desk portal with screenshots, and this will help us to indicate to identify these issues, and we can then plan them for fixing. Quite often the issues with PDF can be solved very quickly, so thanks for reporting that, and we will investigate.
Thank you. I would take still this one as is quite relevant. Is the PLM portal mandatory for central procedures after the 15th?
No, it is not. It is still possible to use either the interactive PDF eAF or the PLM portal web-based form. However, the web-based application form is in strongly recommended use for all procedure types. So if you are not technically prevented to use the PLM portal, we always strongly recommend to use that, but there is always the backup of the interactive PDF available, no matter which procedure type.
Thank you very much, Christina, for answering also this question. I would now move back to the slides so we can move on to the final section of the presentation.
Thank you, Francesco. And just for those colleagues who had posted a question and we didn't have time to answer, we will answer those in writing, so you can check back in Slido, hopefully today. I hope there aren't too many, and we'll keep the Slido open for a little bit longer, of course, if you want to add another question that we didn't have time to address here today, so we can address those in writing. And of course, once the recording is available, you can then listen, find the answers. And if there is something really important here, we may lift it into a Q&A document. But just to highlight some upcoming eAF events, we are planning to organize a training on the interactive PDF eAF form for the marketing authorization applications. So this is a change that we're implementing mainly for the kind of IDMP compliance reasons. And as you know, we don't normally have trainings on the interactive PDFs, but this is quite an important change. So we will be offering some training for that because we don't yet have the web-based version for the MAA forms. And we're also planning to have some further training sessions for the eAF web-based application form in February, and then for the veterinary MAA form later on in March. So these dates will be defined, so please keep on following our events page and the eAF webpage, and you will find information from there. I think we might have one slide with regards to where to find more information on how to report any issues.
You should be seeing the how to report the slide.
I think I may have some kind of delay on my screen, but there is a regular slide that, yes, now I can see it too. So how to inform EMA of technical issues. So here we've had quite a few questions reporting either a technical issue or regulatory question. So please check the presentation to which is the correct channel to ask questions. Of course, you have then other channels to ask regulatory questions, and also these variation classification guideline web pages for EMA and for CMDH will give a contact who to contact when you have more regulatory nature questions. So these questions are for technical issues. And I think our time is up, so I'd like to thank you all very much for great questions, and thank you for participating. And as Francesco mentioned, please give us feedback on this session so that we can improve in future to make sure that we are giving webinars that are useful for the users. Thank you so much.